question number 10, we had the square root 225. How do we do this problem? So if you put this in your calculator right away, your answer is going to be 15. But sometimes you're going to have to do it all the way. If you put this in your calculator and you get a decimal, that means you're going to have to break it down more than just hitting the square root button. So to do that, you have to find out what numbers multiplied together give you 225. Because it ends in a 5, you know 5 goes in there. So if you divide that by 5, you get 45 and 5. But then you can break down 45 further where one number is a perfect square. So if I take 45, I can break that down into 9 times 5. Just bring my square root sign on top of that. Don't forget to bring down this 5 with that problem. So now I have 9 times 5 times 5. Inside this square root sign, we have a perfect square 9. What's the square root of 9? That would be 3. So what happens is the 3 comes out. Then, if you look inside your square root sign, you have 2 5s inside there. Remember the trick. If you have 2 the same number in there, it just comes out. Those 2 cancel out, and that number comes out on the side. So then you're left with 3 times 5, which then is 15. Okay, our next problem, which is number 20, that was 3 square root 150 be the 8th power. If I put 150 in my calculator, I'm going to get a decimal. That tells me that we need to break this 150 down further. So we got to find out what number times each other gives you 150, and hopefully one's a perfect square. So when I look at 150, I would come up with, all right, so if we come up with 2 numbers that make 150, I'm going to use 75 and 2. And I also have b to the 8th power. I need to break down 75 again, because 75 is not a perfect square. What 2 numbers multiply together give me 75? 25 and 3. Now I'm going to bring down these other numbers too, b and the 2. We got 2b to the 8th power. Now if I look at this all underneath the square root sign, what's the square root of 25? That would be 5. So that one I've taken care of. What's the square root of 3? There isn't one, so I leave that inside. What's the square root of 2? There's not one, so that stays inside. And I'm looking for the square root of an exponent for this 8. To find the square root of 8, you got to take half of it. So what's half of 8? 4. So this number right here turns into b to the 4th power. So I'm left with 5b to the 4th power, 3 times 2 on the inside. I need to multiply these 2 together. So my final answer is 5b to the 4th power, square root 6. And next problem, number 22, we have square root 8 times square root 32. What you could have done in this problem is just multiply those 2 together, because this is the same thing as saying 8 times 32. When you did that, you got what number? 256. So 256 is the square root. If you put that in your calculator, real quick, you will get square root of 256 is 16. But some of you did it that way, some of you didn't. Some of you realized, oh, I can do it this way and get 16. But some of you broke this down too. I'm going to show you how you would break this down just to get you more practice on doing problems that don't come out together. Okay? But this is another way you could have done it. I need to break down 8 and 32. What two numbers go into 8, where 1 is a perfect square? 4 times 2 gives me 8. For 32, I want to find a number that's a perfect square that'll work a lot easier than doing other numbers. Looking at these two numbers, I know it's even, so 2 goes into it. So it's going to be 2 times 16 to give me 32. So now that I have all my numbers in the square root sign, I'm going to go and take out all the perfect squares. So what is the square root of 4? 2. What is the square root of 16? 4. Notice that I'm multiplying both of those numbers together. 2 times 4. The other trick we know is whenever we have the same number in there twice, whenever we have a pair, the pair comes out, but only one of those numbers come out. So I have the square root of 4, which equals 2. The square root of 16 is 4. And because I have 2 of the same number, the 2 comes out. And if I put this in my calculator, 2 times 4 is 8, times 2 is 16. So this would be my final answer if you broke it down this way. Okay, next problem, number 28. 3 square root 5c times 7 square root 15c squared. We have two numbers outside the square root sign. If we have that, we need to multiply those two together. So we have 3 times 7, and on the inside, we have 5c and 15c squared. So I take these two numbers and multiply and get 21. Can I break down 5 anymore? C? No, just bring down 5c. Can I break down 15? Yeah, two numbers that give me 15 are 5 and 3, and then I'm just going to bring down my c square root, or to the second power, sorry. So we have 5c times 5 times 3 times c to the second power. Now we need to look back inside our square root sign. Are there any perfect squares or any numbers that are the same? Okay, we have 5 here and a 5 there. So on the outside, we have our 21 times 5. Can I break down this c? No. Can I break down this 3? No. How about this c? C to the second power, and the exponents, if your exponent is 2, you want to take half of it, which is 1. So on the outside, I have c to the first power. I'm just going to make this slide a little bit better. Okay, let me make it a little bit better. Okay, so what are we left with inside? We have the 3, and we have the c. So my final answer would be to multiply those two together, and I get 21 times 5 is 105. C is the first power. I don't need the 1 there. It's an invisible 1. So I can just write C, and inside I have 3C. So this would be the final answer. Next problem, number 36. We have 16 over 25. Another way of looking at this problem, make it a little easier, you could rewrite this as 16 and the square root of 25. So you have square root of 16 over the square root of 25, and you do it just like you did before. What's the square root of 16? 4. Square root of 25? 5. So that would be our final answer. Okay, next problem, number 42, 1 over square root 11. Remember, we don't want a square root number in the bottom. So what we need to do is multiply by that number on the bottom. So multiply the top and the bottom by square root 11. By doing that, 1 times square root 11 is square root 11. On the bottom, square root 11 times square root 11 is just 11. Remember the trick? If you have the same number with the square root sign, your final answer is that same number. Okay? So you could go square root 11 times square root 11 and get that number, and then take the square root of that number. You're going to end up, again, still getting 11. So that's what you want to do with this problem. Okay, number 64, we have negative 3, square root 2 over square root 6. What I want to do first is look at the two numbers in the square root sign. We need to reduce those two numbers. If you have square root numbers on top of each other, you can look at that as 2 over 6. Okay, I want to reduce those two numbers. If I have 2 over 6, that's going to reduce to 1 over 3. So I'm going to replace those numbers with the ones I just have right here. So I'm going to rewrite that as negative 3 square root 1 over square root 3. So my next step is to multiply the top and the bottom by square root 3, because we don't want a square root on the bottom side. So when I do that, I get negative 3 square root 3. Square root 3 times square root 3, it's the same number that's inside here. Your answer becomes 3. All right, sorry about that. My calendar popped up. My last step of this problem, I have a negative 3 up on top, and I have a 3 on the bottom. Those two numbers go together. So if I'm looking at this just like I did up here with this fraction, I'm going to look at that as negative 3 over 3, which then would reduce to negative 1 over 1. So I'm going to continue the problem over here on this side of the board. And I'm going to take, okay, so over here we have negative 1 on top, 1 on the bottom, along with our square root 3 number. Do I need this 1 on the bottom? No. I can rewrite this as negative 1 square root 3. Let me remove this a little bit. Speaking of invisible ones, do I need this 1 in front of the square root sign? No. So this invisible 1, or this just goes away, so I have negative square root 3. So my final answer would be negative square root 3